This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
You want to see my gnarly finger? Look at that. Not look awful and stupid. So my finger got broke like 12 weeks ago, and it's been a splint ever since. I went to the doctor this morning. They took the splint off, and he's like, oh, we can kind of get it a little bit straighter. I'm like, I'm good, dude. It's been 12 weeks. I'm just going to deal with a gnarly-ass finger that's dipping over.
All right, welcome in to the Practice Squad Live. A little bit of a delay today. You know, Stoz, I love getting to do the show live, but it is a learning experience every single week. I was a little quiet last week. Hopefully we're doing good this week. If you're listening right now and I'm a little quiet, let us know, and I can shout at you. Before we get into the show today, feels like a little bit of a different show. We are going to talk about some of the changes to the Rooney Rule in the NFL. Stoz has got some strong opinions. I think we agree for the most part. We got to get to that. If you can't tell, I'm in a very different situation here this week. I got that red background. Yeah, I'm at my dad's.
Welcome home, baby.
Yeah, I just, without a job right now, I thought it's going to be a lot harder to visit home if I end up getting a job at some point. So I wanted to take the time I have now to, visit home. But my drive, if you didn't see on Twitter, was a nightmare. So we're going to be talking about my drive and any hellish drives you may have had. And then finally, we haven't really done a lot of talk about The Last Dance. We did a little bit talk about Jordan as a teammate, but, we're kind of going to react to The Last Dance. And what are some documentaries you'd like to see done in long form like that?
Real quick, Carter Jordan T wants to know if you're back in Michigan permanently.
No. I'm
just visiting, right?
Yeah. So I actually rented a car to drive here. And then what I'm doing is basically I'm just waiting until I decide I want to go home or go back to Houston, which is, my home now, and renting a car and heading back. I don't anticipate being back here permanently. I expect it to probably be a week or two, but outside of the drive, it's nice right now.
Wait, how are you feeling this morning? Because last night we talked and you said that you were going out with your buddy. So before we really get into all this, how you feeling?
Dude,
you had a little hangover?
I only had like 4 or 5 drinks, and you can't go out in Michigan right now, can you? I was just at a friend's house.
No.
One friend, but yeah, no, I only had 4 or 5 drinks. I'm going to be honest with you. I totally forgot we were doing this. Not last night. Well, I guess kind of last night. I didn't set an alarm. Luckily for me, my sleep schedule has changed since I started the drive back because I was waking up early to drive, and then I haven't gotten back to my original sleep schedule, my non-work sleep schedule. So I woke up early enough, and then not to mention, it's noon now, right? I've been doing this in Houston where it would only be 11 o'clock when this starts. So thankfully, I woke up in time and I was like, oh God, I got to do a podcast. And we planned the whole show yesterday already. So we didn't have a whole lot to figure out, but I forgot. And thankfully, if I was in Houston and I forgot, it might have been an issue. Thankfully, being here, I woke up early enough. I also wouldn't have forgot if I was still in Houston. But Strohs, getting into the NFL Rooney Rule stuff, I don't totally know where we're going with this other than you have some issues. I'm just going to kind of let you take it where you want to take it.
Yeah, I think so. This is kind of a multi-platform issue I have with the Rooney Rule as a whole. I think the fact that we have to have the Rooney Rule in the NFL is an indictment on the league. Have a rule to bring in minority candidates to hire them. What does that say about you and your owners? What does that say about you and your league? And then the fact that there was this proposed rule, and this is not what they ended up going to, but there was a proposed rule, and I've got all this written down. I'm going to show you my little handy dandy sheet of paper here. So I'm going to basically read to you what Jim Trotter wrote on NFL.com. And the proposed modification basically wanted to incentivize teams and organizations for bringing in minority candidates. And the way it would work is the team would hire a minority head coach. The team would then move up 6 spots in the 3rd round of the draft after the coach's 2nd season. It would move up 10 spots if the team hires a person of color that is part of its primary football executive, which usually it's a GM. In addition to that, if the team hired minority candidates for both jobs in the same year, that team would jump 16 spots. The incentive would also give new hires more than just a year or two. A 4th round pick would improve 5 spots after a GM or coach's 3rd year with a team. So you're looking at incentivizing and giving teams better draft capital if they go out and they hire a black general manager or they hire a minority coach. Also, it was reported that clubs would receive a 5th-round compensatory pick if a minority assistant left to take another team's job to be a coordinator. Trotter said also if a person of color leaves for a head coach or a general manager job, his previous team would get a 3rd-round compensatory pick. To me, this is insane that you have to do this, that this has to be something that is formulated for teams to even look into bringing in people of color. There was more that was added to this. A team that hires a minority quarterbacks coach, which is often the step before becoming an offensive coordinator, would get a 4th-round compensatory pick if that quarterbacks coach is retained past one season. The requirement for teams to interview minorities would apply to coordinators' positions for the first time.
So okay, I will say this. We kind of discussed this a little bit yesterday, off podcast. We both agree that there's a definite problem with the lack of minority coaches in the NFL.
Absolutely.
And you think the Rooney Rule is insulting. I don't have a strong take on the Rooney Rule as it currently existed. I think the proposals about giving draft picks is honestly laughable. And the funniest thing about it is the same owners who have to vote on a rule like that, they're the ones who get the final say on who coaches their football teams, on who runs their football teams. So it's laughable that these people are like, we have to fix this problem, but let's incentivize ourselves to do it. Like, no, the incentive is you recognize there's an issue. That being said, I don't mind extending the Rooney Rule to assistants. I think it's part of the problem. Not all of it. I definitely don't think it's all of it. And I've had this discussion with friends in group chats. I think it is a 2-part issue in the NFL. Because here's the thing. 70% of NFL players are black. You would expect a higher percentage of them to get onto coaching. So I think it's at the top and at the bottom. And when I say at the top, what I mean by that is, and I want to say this. I don't know where you're on this, Stoz. I don't think this is like open, I'll put it this way, conscious. I don't think this is conscious racism. I don't think owners are like, we hate minorities. But what I do think is that people hire people who look like them. And I think it's probably even worse when you're talking about the people running NFL franchises. You're talking about rich, old, white people. So the owners hire white executives who hire white coaches, who hire white assistants, and it's just white from top to bottom. And so I do think there's a need for more assistants that are minorities, but there's also a need, because even if you get those assistants, their chances of getting hired are a lot higher when there are minorities higher up at the top. And like, I don't know what the solution is. I saw someone suggest, and I think there's some level of realism to this, is you need minorities in owners meetings, and it's, you don't have minority owners outside of the Jaguars owner, Shaka Khan.
Shad Khan. Shaka Khan. Shad Khan.
Shad Khan. Who's Shaka Khan? There's a Shaka Khan too, isn't there?
Shaka Khan's a singer.
Okay. Whatever. I thought there was a Shaka Khan.
You're super white. It's great.
But like, he's the only minority owner. And you have to, you kind of need something at the top. I don't like the incentive rules. I think they're laughable because the same people voting on those rules are the same people who have the ability to stop this on their own. But there does need to be some sort of a solution. And I think on that level, I can at least appreciate them trying to figure something out.
I think it's super disrespectful to a lot of the minority coaches that are here in the league right now. I mean, you had former head coach Marvin Lewis. Marvin Lewis came out and said he was totally offended by the draft pick incentive. He said it feels like it's having the Jim Crow laws. And then you've seen Anthony Lynn, the Chargers head coach, come out and was totally offended by this. If I'm a person of color and you want to basically hire me because you're going to get a better draft pick, like, what does that say about my ability?
Yeah,
what does that say about you as an owner?
It takes away. It is like saying you aren't capable of getting this job on your own, which is
right.
Which is a problem. I just don't know. I just don't know what the answer is, though. I mean, the answer is easy. The owners have power. If the owners feel that this is something that needs to change, then they can do it on their own. But that's we have a lot of history to tell us that that's not going to happen.
Bruce Arians, I think, is super ahead of the curve on a lot of things. And him bringing women in to coach with him, I think is fantastic. I think it's one of those things where he's giving somebody else a bit of a nod. And I don't understand why it is so difficult for rich white men to kind of get out of their own way and allow other people to have a platform. You know, if you're a different color, who cares? If you're a woman, who cares? Like, you don't have to have man bits to coach football. You just don't.
I do think you got to wonder at least a little bit, and this is another problem all in itself, is the fact that we don't have many black quarterbacks part of it, at least on the offensive side of the ball. Because quarterbacks, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but you would think quarterbacks tend to be the most common transition to coordinators, right? You do have the former cornerback, is it Byron Leftwich, who's an offensive coordinator in the NFL right now.
Yes.
Now, they did make one change that I think is, and this has been approved, that I think is a good move, and it's not insulting at all, at least in my opinion. The NFL has relaxed its anti-tampering policies so that teams who are still alive in the playoffs can't deny, or actually I don't know if it's quite that, but they can't deny assistant coaches and executives opportunities to interview for jobs with other organizations. And so
Correct.
Specifically what I was thinking of, and again, we're still talking, maybe this solves one case, but the Chiefs coordinator, right? Eric, I don't want to mess his name up, is Bieniemy?
Bieniemy, yep.
The coordinator for the Chiefs. Like, this is a guy who we've been saying for 2 or 3 years should be a top-tier head coaching candidate. And when you make deep playoff runs, it's been tough. I may have actually misunderstood what this. I don't know if that this solves that or not. It feels like it should.
Here, I'll read it to you because I printed it up. So under the new rule, teams will be required to interview at least 2 external minority candidates for head coaching jobs. Under the previous version of the rule, teams were required to interview only 1 minority candidate. In addition to that, teams will be required to interview 1 external minority candidate for coordinator, general manager, and senior football operation positions. Executive positions will also be subjected to the Rooney Rule. Teams must interview a minority candidate or a woman for certain front office positions, according to the NFL's release. Let's see here. For the first time, the Rooney Rule will also apply to a wide range of executive positions. Clubs must now include minorities and or females in their interview process for senior level front office positions, such as club president and senior executives in communications, finance, human resources, legal, football operations, sales, marketing, sponsorship, information technology, and security positions. The league office will also adhere to these requirements. That was all reported on Monday night. I know what you're talking about. I thought I had it here. I do not have it here. I apologize. What it does say, I do know what it says. It does say that teams cannot block coordinators from interviewing for head coaching jobs.
Or assistants for coordinator jobs.
Right. So if you have a minority candidate who is on another team, so like they were saying, the quarterback position or the quarterback coach, if you're in a playoff run, he can go interview for, say the Detroit Lions are looking for a new head coach next year and the Chiefs are making a deep playoff run. The Lions can go interview Eric Bieniemy if they want, bring him in, and then if he wants to, they can also interview his quarterback coach.
And that's such that's such a minor, like, I don't think it's going to make a significant change, but right now the NFL's in a spot where it's, how many minority coaches are in the NFL right now? Head coaches? 2?
2, I think. So it's Anthony Lynn and
Mike Tomlin.
Yes.
Is that it?
Thank you. I think that's it. Oh, no. Because what's his name for Washington? Washington's head coach. He's Latino. Ron Rivera.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So 3 right now. It's if you believe like I do that it's both
Brian
top,
Flores as well. So 4. There's 4.
Okay. So I mean, if you believe like I do though that it's top and bottom, every guy who comes in. Again, this isn't just a sports thing. I think in any business you look, typically people hire people who look like them. The more you can get some diversity at the top ranks, the more it should just by default help at the bottom ranks. One thing that, like, when I was having this discussion in a group chat, and I didn't dive deep enough into it, but like I think of Marvin Lewis hired Hugh Jackson as a coordinator. And I mean, we obviously know Hugh Jackson was terrible. Mm-hmm. But like I'd imagine most white coaches have white coordinators. It's just you tend to hire people who look like you, and it's unfortunate, but that's the way things have gone in the NFL to this point. So I do think it is 2-part, and I like that they want to address. I like that they also want to address the assistants. I'm glad that they've tabled for now the draft pick incentive. I don't know if we'll see it pop back up. We agree that was laughable. I don't know, Stoz, was there anything else in this discussion you needed to get to? Because you were pretty passionate about it yesterday.
Yeah, I just think it's a total disgrace that the Rooney Rule still exists and it has to be implemented. I do find it funny, though, that your group chats are completely different than my group chats.
You know what?
You guys sit there and talk about sports and stuff. I'm usually trying to avoid getting wiener pics from my buddies and just all kinds of debauchery.
I mean, we're different people, Stoz, if that isn't... I thought you were going to go there. We were talking like race issues. I have a very diverse group chat. You know, growing up in Metro Detroit, it's a diverse area. Yeah, my group chats probably look nothing like yours.
Absolutely not.
But coming up, we are going to have our first real conversation about The Last Dance and some full-length, multi-week documentaries that we'd like to see. I guess it could be outside of sports too. But Stoz, the drive home from Houston to Detroit, it's supposed to be about a 20-hour drive. When I drove to Houston, I split it up into 3 days. Made it take like 22 because I didn't go, I didn't take a straight line. But I don't mind it. I don't know, like, if you've ever done a long drive like that by yourself. But it was, I like sports radio, so I'm listening to sports radio. I enjoy my music. I enjoy my podcast. Like, I'm listening to so many different things. And I also don't mind, I have some audiobooks too. So I don't mind it. But what I did to get back here is the most miserable experience. I can't even begin to describe it to you. I tweeted that I'd have rather had to sit down and watch the Tiger season marathon style, and I mean it, man. Like, let me tell you something. The words flash flood have a new meaning to me after this drive home. Like, when you see a flash flood warning, what do you think? Does that affect the way you go about your day at all?
No, not really.
Like, I've never taken the words flash flood to mean anything in my life. But let me tell you, it means something. It means don't be an idiot and drive 1,500 miles across the country through just nothing but flash floods. When you're driving to, like, the grocery store or your friend's house, it's not as big of a deal. But when you're driving from Houston to Detroit and you just have miles and miles and miles of corn and just farmland and nothing, it sucks, dude. And I'm not kidding. So first day, I didn't even look at the weather on the drive. And I was like mad at myself after the first day, but a friend made a good point. There's nothing I was going to see that was going to convince me it was going to be as bad as it was. But so first day, I set out and I get from Houston to Hope, Arkansas. I don't know where the hell Hope, Arkansas was. I stayed there and I still couldn't tell you where it was. My plan was to get all the way to Memphis. But my first day, I was pulling off I pulled off the road maybe 5 hours into my drive for the first time because the roads were getting too flooded. And then over the next 3 hours, I proceeded to go like 50 miles. And the last time I pulled over, there were like 7 or 8 cars in front of me pulled over on the shoulder. Because again, keep in mind, like, I'm in the middle of nowhere. And like everybody's pulled off. Like, there's nowhere we can go. We're just sitting on the side of the road because you just can't drive. And like the thing I need to stress is like there were heavy rains, but it's not the rain that was so much the issue. It was that the roads, like, it had rained so much recently that the roads couldn't handle it, and any rain was causing flooding. And like, not because of rain exclusively, obviously, but like you saw what happened in Midland yesterday. Like the whole country's been hit so hard with rain that like water levels are just very high. And so finally, like after I stopped and saw like a line of cars stopped, I was like, I got to get a hotel. And so I stopped in Hope, Arkansas. And then I pulled up this app. I found an app that lets you check your drive the whole way. And it was like from Hope, Arkansas to Detroit, Michigan, there were like 19 flash flood warnings. And dude, it's just like driving 25 hours is one thing, but because that's how long it took me. 25, it's supposed to take about 20. Driving 25 hours with, by the way, a rental car that is like a $40,000 car. I have no insurance on it. Like, I don't have a job currently. Like, if anything happens to this car, I'm going to be in debt for the rest of my damn life. Which, to be fair, like, made me more nervous, made me more likely to pull off and wait, because I couldn't risk it. But, like, try spending, like, 20 hours, like, driving through floods and just, like, it's so mentally exhausting, the amount of time that I spent hoping I didn't, like, kill myself or ruin the car. And it was just, like, I'm, like, I think... you remember back when I, like, not long after I moved to Houston, there was flooding, and I had to ditch my car. And thank God none of the water damage was severe. But, like, it had water damage after the fact. Like, I couldn't use my keys to unlock or lock things. The windows didn't work. The only lasting effect, everything else has come back to normal. But the only lasting effect is I can't use the buttons on the steering wheel to change my music, which is, like, super no big deal, but, disappointing. But, like, I think, like that scarred me a little bit, made me more nervous to drive through flooded waters. And, like, I'm, like, scarred to drive back, man.
So here's a question for you. Is all of the rain and all of the flooding, is it because of you have to cross over the Mississippi River? So is it along basically the banks of the Mississippi River? Is that where it's coming from? Or is it
Stoz, it's coming from
everywhere?
Literally everywhere. I can't stress to you enough. Every single body of water I drove by was like clearly at like uncomfortably dangerous levels. And I'll put it this way, I don't know that there was ever a time I genuinely had to stop driving, but like, you know, like hydroplaning is just something that's going to happen sometimes. You try to avoid it when you're on the road, but like doing it on the highway is scary as hell. And there were times like you couldn't drive on the highway without it. And it was everywhere. And yeah, along the Mississippi River was a rough spot. My last day, thankfully, when I looked at my last day, it didn't look as bad. And I got all the way from, so my second day I got to, I'm not actually sure how it's pronounced, Terre Haute. It's like 60 miles maybe west of Indianapolis. I got all the way from Hope, Arkansas to there. It was like an 11-hour driving day. Probably pulled over 7 or 8 times.
But it took you 3 days to get here, right? Or
yeah,
about
and here's
3
the thing, like, so it was 8 hours the first day. I planned to go longer, but I just, at that point, that was the worst. When I stopped...
Dude, your nerves are shot, you're tired, you're stressed. I totally get it.
And I wasn't prepared for it the first day. The second day, I had to deal with a lot of crap, too. But, like, I knew when I started my drive, I was going to have to deal with it. And I kid you not, I am dead freaking serious, Stoz. The amount of mental work it took to do this, like, basically what I was doing was anytime I had like clear skies and clear roads, like I was viewing that as like, this is my mental break. Like this is my mental break to get through the shit storm that I'm about to deal with when it starts raining wherever I get to. And so like I'd get a nice hour break and then like an hour and a half where the roads are just flooded and then another hour break and then flooded roads. And like I was like heavily focused on those breaks as legitimately like breaks. Right now I can appreciate that I can listen to my music, and I mean, I was listening to my music when it was raining too. But like, I can listen to my music, enjoy my music, kind of take a moment to just like stop being, you know, white knuckling on for rain. And it was work. It was mental work driving home. And I like driving, honestly. If you could give me clear skies and like good roads the whole way, I think I'd enjoy the drive.
Man, that sounds absolutely brutal.
You ever had any miserable driving experiences? And if you're watching live or listening back on the podcast, at Brendan Riley _ at Adam R. Stoz on Twitter, you know, I'm sure I'm not alone. And one of my friends actually said he drove from Arkansas to Detroit in the middle of a hurricane, which I believe there is a tropical storm right now, or there was. I don't know. I haven't paid super close attention. I don't know if that had any effect on what I was dealing with. But you ever had anything miserable like that?
So nothing where it took me 3 days to get anywhere. I have driven through some pretty inclement weather. I have done a cross-country trip. What was San Diego. And that's
how long is that?
What's that?
How long is that?
I think it was about, was it like, I want to say, it took us 2 days. I did it with a buddy of mine. I want to say it was like 28 or 29 hours. We ended up pulling over. We made it the first day. We made it to Colorado, and we stopped in Colorado. He had an aunt that lived there, and we stayed with her for the night. But driving through some of the hills and the mountains in Colorado, everything is very, very narrow, and it's very windy and twisty, and everything is extremely, extremely dark. You can't see what's coming around the corner, so that's kind of terrifying. And I was driving through these hills and through these mountains. And I was scared. You know, you talk about white knuckling, like you're kind of like your breathing, everything kind of gets shallow, and you're kind of like, and you're just trying to just control the car and make sure that you don't hit anything. And again, you can't see anything because everything is so damn dark. But that was probably my longest driving experience, and that was, I mean, like I said, that wasn't even all that. Like we didn't really have inclement weather. We just had the road to deal with. I have driven from here to Indiana, and it's been absolute crap. Like just monsooning in a snowstorm. I also had. Oh, that's something. So driving back from Indiana to Michigan, we ended up having a snowstorm. And my drive normally took roughly 3.5 hours. It took me over 6 hours for that drive. It was absolutely
when
brutal.
I was in Grand Rapids, there were definitely times that like you could add an hour or two. I think like the mental and talking about your cross country road trip too, I think the mental toll of knowing how far you have to go adds to it, right? Because like you're not like almost there. Like I didn't feel like I was almost there until I was like in Toledo. I was like, okay, I can see the finish line. I'm getting close to home. And I gotta tell you, man, the stress of the rental car, which by the way, rental car was awesome. Like I have never personally driven a car that felt so nice.
What did you rent?
So it was a like I don't know if it was a 2019 or probably 2019 Altima.
Okay.
But it had like all the bells and whistles. So like I had like I don't know how big the screen was, but I swear it might have been 12 inches with my GPS and my music on there. And then like I had these sweet sensors for like if people were my blind spot, which like my car's fine. Like I drive a Fusion, I think 2013 Fusion. Like it's not a bad car, but like this was just so nice. But like the fear of not having insurance on this car and driving through these conditions across the country was not fun.
So here's a question for you. How much was the added insurance?
It's like $20 a day. But here's the thing. When you're paying $30 a day for the car, it's just tough.
Yeah.
So the last time I've rented a car before, I rented a car and drove to North Carolina to visit a friend. And we did the insurance then. And after the fact, I was told by some people like, nah, it's a scam. It's not worth it. Blah, 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 blah. And so this time, like I was trying to do it as cheap as possible. And so I was like, nah, I'll be fine. I don't know what I'm going to do when I go back. I might take it just for like the mental not rest, but just like to not feel so scared because like if I wrecked that car, like it would I would be dealing with that for the next 20 years.
I don't think your insurance would pick it up.
I call them because that's the thing. Most people's insurance like will cover rental cars, but I have bare bones insurance on my own car. So like I called them and asked. I said, no, you have to have more coverage before it covers rental cars. So this was like this is do or die.
Yeah, I got you. That makes sense then. So, like, I know you don't necessarily have a specific date in mind when you might be going back. You have an approximate idea. Is it going to be as arduous and as treacherous when you do go back?
God, I hope not. I don't really want to fly. It's more expensive, and I just feel more comfortable right now driving. But if it looks like it's going to be, I'd at least consider it. But yeah, no, I don't. I can't imagine it will be. I think I just got unlucky timing. Like I doubt. That I bet if you looked over the course of a year and tried to plan a 3-day drive, you'd have a hard time finding one that was as rough as the one I did. Outside of maybe the winter when you're dealing with snow in the northern states, but finding a time of year when it's that bad in the the southern part of the drive, I think would be really tough.
It sounds like it was absolutely
because normally
brutal,
like everyone's gonna have their different weather. You might drive through an area that's flooded, but you're gonna get out of it, right? When you're doing a road trip, you're like, oh, we're gonna drive out of the storm and it'll be smooth sailing. Nah, you're going to drive out of this storm and right into the next one. And I think the storm was traveling northeast, which Houston to Detroit, northeast. So worst case scenario.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, Stoz, we haven't reacted a ton to The Last Dance. You watched it all, right?
Yes.
I'm kind of curious. Like, I do want to talk about some long form documentaries we would want to see. And again, if you're watching live or listening back to the podcast at Brendan Riley _ at Adam R. Stoz. What are some long-form documentary, sports or otherwise, I'm mostly thinking sports, that you would want to see? But I'm curious to know, because I know you hate Jordan, like full picture, like reaction to The Last Dance.
So I found it entertaining. I thought there were some things that were whitewashed. I thought the way it ended kind of on a clunker. I really felt like what they could have put in a half-hour E60, they stretched out for 2 hours.
Can I tell you, I would have liked to see like a half hour of. I know it's The Last Dance. It's about the last season with the Bulls. I would have liked to see like a half hour or even 15 minutes on his Wizard stint.
Well, here's the thing. He had a career after Chicago, and they made zero reference to it. The thing is, you have people who never had the opportunity or the ability to watch Michael Jordan.
I didn't watch him as a Bull.
And that's what this was. What's that?
The counter would be it was The Last Dance. It wasn't about just Jordan. It was about this team.
No, I get that. But you didn't even make reference to what he went on to do. It was just like Jordan retired.
Well, and don't you feel like I feel like in a documentary, like no matter what it's about, there is like a short, depending on the length of time. If it's an hour long documentary, you might only get 5 minutes. But there's some sort of a like, here's what happened after that. Yeah, this is a 10-hour documentary. So like if I could have gotten 15 minutes, wouldn't have even cared that much about his history as a GM or owner or anything. I would have
legitimately in text you could have put up Jordan retired to then come out of retirement to play for the Wizards. he now owns part of the Wizards. That's all you had to write. Just put it on the screen. Let me read it. It just ends. It just stops.
It would have.
I was like, what the hell is this?
So I knew we weren't going to get it. I mean, because for one, again, this was about the Bulls and about that last dance. But on top of that, that's where, Jordan probably had some say in the matter. But I never watched Jordan on the Bulls. I'd got to watch Jordan play on the Wizards. And so, I'd love to see them discuss his decision to play for the Wizards. His, what it was like for him, what it was like for the teammates. Was he a more matured, was he the same asshole in Washington, or was he, toned down? I'd like to see not a whole documentary, just wrap that up for me. Give me 10 to 15 minutes on the end of Jordan's playing career. I enjoyed it as well. I think it was really good. I don't think neither myself nor just the country as a whole would have had the same love and attention to it had there been sports going on at the time. The original release was supposed to be in June, I believe, after the NBA Finals. That was a well-positioned release because, let's be real here. Outside of the diehard baseball fans, you do miss a lot of sports in the baseball months. So it was a well-timed release, but I think we were so hungry because we haven't had anything in a while.
I think what ESPN could have did too that might have made it a little bit better is you could have stretched it out and just gave us an hour every week instead of doing.
I don't think I would have minded that.
Legitimately, think about it. Right, the first 5 episodes were really, really good and really.
People
really
were saying 6 and 7 or no. What was it? 5 and 6? I want to say 5 and 6 were considered the 2 best episodes by a lot of people.
So I think you started to lose me when they started talking about his father and when the way they positioned it as Jordan was tired and he was mentally taxed from winning 3 championships in a row. He needed some time off, so he chose to retire. Mind you, he chose to retire and then immediately go and play baseball. If you're tired and you need time to recharge, you don't just go play another sport or get yourself in condition to go play another sport to sign a minor league contract to then try to fight for a spot in the major leagues, only for 18 months later to come back and play in the NBA. So the documentary, and I use the word documentary very, very loosely here, really lost me with everything that surrounded that decision because I felt like they whitewashed a lot of what took place.
I wasn't around and I don't know what took place. I guess I don't see why that can't be viable.
So living through it, everything that came out about, so his dad and himself were both big time.
Yeah,
gamblers.
I know the conspiracy. I do. I don't see and here's the thing. I'm not going to criticize you for buying this conspiracy. I see what's there for it. I just also think somebody being tired of the demands and the expectations and what he is in basketball, I can buy somebody just being ready to be done with that, but still being a competitor and wanting to take on a new challenge. I can understand how that's a thing.
To me, it just doesn't make sense. If you're physically taxed and you need to get away, get away.
But it's different, dude. Baseball and basketball are not the same physical demand. Prince Fielder played baseball.
No, for sure. It's not the same physical demand, but if you're that much of a competitor, and the thing that I think everybody takes out of this documentary is Jordan was crazy enough to create problems that he had to overcome. So if you're this much of a competitor and you want to move on to something else, or you want some type of new ball of wax to play with, he goes and chooses baseball. He now is so driven and maddeningly so that he's going to go play baseball. And you don't think that he's not going to create some type of situation in his mind to drive him, to push him to become the best baseball player he could become? I mean, it just doesn't make sense that you do this in basketball and you're going to go and do it in baseball. If you're tired, you're tired. Just take a damn break. I just don't think
that's the way, that's not the way everyone works. That's not the way everyone's brains work. It feels like you're looking at this too much this is how I feel, so this is how it is. I'm not saying he's telling the truth, but I'm saying that it's not some incredibly twisted version of reality that's not viable.
I just don't, watching Jordan play. And then watching this documentary, I've seen a couple other documentaries on Michael Jordan as well. He would force himself and drive himself to get the absolute most out of himself. And I get what you're saying, that baseball is taxing in a different way. The conditioning's a little bit different. All of it's a little bit different. But if you're going to go at the peak of your game and I'm just tired. I just need to get away. Cool. You're going to go take on baseball now. And this is a sport that you're good at, but you're not that good at. So now you've got to scratch and claw and fight. It just, to me, it seemed, the way the documentary positioned it and the way the documentary set it up, you could tell that was very heavily handed by Michael Jordan. And I wasn't looking for something necessarily journalistic. I was looking for something pretty enjoyable. This was, for the most part, enjoyable. But living through it all, it lost me here. And then getting to, like, the whole thing with the Utah Jazz, I thought was fantastic because that was such an epic. Those two series were so epic. The way episode 10 ended just kind of left me thinking, like, that was rushed.
It's over. They win.
That was not really
and the team
finished.
was dismantled. The end.
Yeah. It
did feel rushed.
It was,
and that's where the whole, like, I feel like most documentaries wrap with specifically the one that comes to mind for me is the Bad Boys documentary. And I know that one ends with, and here was the falling of the Bad Boys. And, like, I just think that's how you're used to a documentary ending. It kind of ties it all together and shows you what came next. The one other thing I want to ask you about before we get into long-form documentaries we'd want to see, where are you, I have a feeling I know, on Pizzagate? Not the political Pizzagate, of course.
Yeah. I don't know if I buy 100% what Jordan was selling. I knew you wouldn't. Look, it was food poisoning is what it seems like, but I don't know if the pizza joint, like, poisoned his food. You know what I'm saying?
So you think, so I thought, I got a tweet from somebody, it's Grand Rapids. Was it Mike? Hold on. I want to find this real quick. I got a tweet from Mike Lissette. Said the idea he got drunk has been gathering steam the last several years. And I kind of thought that was the route that you were going to go. For me, everything that I've ever heard about Jordan, everything that this documentary showed us about Jordan, it makes it hard to believe he'd get so drunk before a finals game that he'd be hungover the following night. Because that's not, I mean, I'm not saying it's not possible, but the level of hard you have to go to have a hangover the following night, it just doesn't seem like the Jordan that I've watched and throughout the rest of this documentary. And of course, like you said, he has his hand on it. But I thought you were going to go that route. I don't.
No, I don't. I don't necessarily think it was. He was boozing. I think he was sick. Something happened. Whether he was drinking or whether he ate something bad, something happened. It wasn't the flu, but I don't know if I buy that
they did it intentionally.
Because again, like you said, you have to drink. So, like, have you ever been drunk for 2 days?
What do you think, Stoz?
Probably not you. I have, and. It takes a lot.
I've never woke up in the morning drunk. I've woke up drunk in the middle of the night, but I've never woke up in the morning drunk.
We need to hang out, B.
No, I don't think that sounds like a good idea.
I think it sounds great.
All right, so moving forward, any long-form documentaries you had in mind?
Oh, dude, I've got a couple. That I'd love to see. I would love to see from the time Matt Millen takes over the Lions.
I don't even think about that.
To the 0-16 season. Just all the missteps, all the moves that were made, and I just really want to be there on what took place in the draft, especially with Joey Harrington, because there's differing reports. It sounded like Matt Millen did not want Joey Harrington, but he was forced to take Joey Harrington. So I want something with Matt Millen's time as Lions general manager.
You know what's funny? I think in 99% of cases, what's more interesting isn't the dismantling of a team, not that they were good, but like. They by the time he was done, they weren't an NFL football team. But usually what's more interesting is the building up, right? So from the 0-16 team to the playoff team, which, plug for the podcast, this Sunday, we react to the final two games of the 2011 Lions regular season. In this case, I don't even think the team going from 0-16 and making the playoffs even comes close. Because Matt Millen did some wild stuff. Like, Ikaika Alama Francis was a second-round draft pick. Drew Stanton was a second-round draft pick. Who drafts a quarterback in the second round that they never give a chance to start? Like, that would be such an interesting documentary to watch. And I feel like he's been somewhat open about the fact that he was in over his head. I think you could have that documentary with him involved.
And, like, just to have him tell you, like, what he was thinking when he was
God, that would be so cool.
It sounds like in his war room, he would just go rogue.
Can I be honest?
Like, everybody's saying, you need to take this guy, and I'm going to go this guy.
I kind of think I would gain a level of sympathy for Matt Millen if he was involved in that, in the making of that documentary.
I don't know if I could ever be sympathetic to the
I'm a very sympathetic person. I understand people.
You are. I definitely
What else
am
do you
not.
have in mind?
You know what? To plug the podcast, we are rewatching the 2011 Detroit Lions season, and there's been a lot of interesting things that we have recounted over. We're going on episode 8 here, coming out this weekend. I would love to see a documentary taking place when Jim Schwartz took over this team, to when Jim Schwartz was fired.
It would be a good one,
because I find him to be
10
so
part
interesting.
would definitely be too much.
Oh yeah, for sure. It could only be like a 5-parter, but I find him to be so interesting because he had to deal with egos like Ndamukong Suh, Calvin Johnson. You had Matt Stafford, who was coming into his own at this time. You had so much to and he said at numerous times the only reason he took this job was because he knew he had a franchise quarterback. So to get his thoughts on Matt Stafford, and Matt Stafford at this time, I think would be really, really interesting. But no, you couldn't do a 10-parter there. I think the 97 Detroit Red Wings would be great. That was when they won their first Stanley Cup in our lifetime, as well as the 2009 Detroit Red Wings, where they lost the Stanley Cup to Pittsburgh with Nick Lindstrom bouncing the puck off the goalpost, and then the aftermath of what took place after all of that, because that team fell apart
probably
after that 2009 season.
You could probably do a long-form podcast, long-form documentary spanning the entire length of the Red Wings playoff run. And obviously you kind of have to gloss over some of the years where they're just not any good, but I think it could be interesting. And honestly, you'd get your conclusion naturally, right? Because after, like you said, after that 09 run, I believe they made one more conference finals against the Ducks. But outside of that, that was a few years of just being irrelevant. Stoz, before I even tell you, and I want to give anyone listening a chance to guess what my favorite, most wanted long-form documentary would be. See if you guys know me. Any thoughts?
Be the 2004
Bam!
Pistons.
And here, I'm going to sell you on how you do it. 10 parts, probably a little bit too much. Give me an hour on Chauncey, Rip, Tayshaun, Ben, and Sheed would be a little bit different because the rest of those guys are outcasts. That's why I think it would work so well. Like Chauncey was failed in Boston. Obviously, moved to Denver. I don't think he was any good there the first time. And then finally got a shot in Detroit. Ben was an undrafted free agent. Rip, I think Rip had some success in Washington, if I recall, before coming over. But again, like traded for Rip. Tayshaun fell all the way to the 22nd pick. Let's be real here. In the NBA draft that you're taking 22nd overall, expectations are low. I don't know if I'd go so far as to call Rasheed a reject. But, Street himself has an interesting story, too. I think a 5-part focusing on each player could be pretty sick.
I think it would be pretty awesome. I mean, you could even build that out, too, because you have everything that took place with Darko leading into that season. You had Larry
Darko
Brown,
could get his own
and then you had what
he
Darko does.
He could.
He really could.
The guy's like a freaking farmer and MMA fighter now, right? Not MMA, but like some type of kickboxing.
Well, he tried MMA. He wasn't very good, but he is a farmer now. But you also have other moves that were made on that team that are super low key and don't really get talked about. There were just acquisitions that were made, and it could just be titled the acquisitions because their bench was filled out with guys like Darvin Ham. Darvin Ham's an interesting dude.
Was it Mike James that they traded? He got cut and then they picked him up. That's not allowed in the NBA anymore. I don't know if it's because of the Pistons, but you can no longer do that. If you trade for a guy, or maybe you can. There's some sort of restrictions around that now. I want to say the Pistons would not be allowed to do that now, but I'm not sure. Maybe it's just because of the waiver system. Somebody else would be able to claim them first. I don't know. I actually don't know what the answer is. I know that there are new rules around that system.
Either way, you've got bench players that all have interesting ways that they showed up on this team, and you could do a whole episode on that. So I legitimately, that 2014, because it was such an interesting cast of characters, you could really build it out. And then if you really wanted to, you could go, basically each series was banana boats, right? So you had your Nets series that was crazy. You had everything that took place when they won the championship against the Lakers. So you could do your own.
The first round against, I believe it was the Bucks, was whatever. But you're right. After that, the Nets series had some wild moments. They fell down 3-2 in that series.
They were supposed to lose that. They were supposed to lose that series,
And then you had
and they ended up coming out
the guarantee, the block heard around the world. And then that Lakers team, talk about the ultimate villain. Like, think about the all-time players on that team. Aside from the obvious Kobe and Shaq, that team had Gary Payton late in his career. Karl Malone late in his career. Like, that team is maybe the most ultimate villainous team to not win a championship.
Yep. And like they had their own drama going on. You could kind of delve into some of that.
End of also, the Kobe Shaq Lakers.
The thing with the thing with the Pacers too,
Win
right?
For Reggie.
Because you had the block, but the thing with the Pacers, you had everything that kind of led up to that with the Malice at the Palace.
The following year.
Oh, was it the following year?
I'm not 100% sure, but I believe the Malice at the Palace.
I have to get my timelines right. But for the longest time, it felt like the Pacers were the team that was standing in Detroit's way, and then for them to get by them was so clutch. Was so clutch, and then they had to go on and play the Lakers, who, like you said, veteran label later.
Now the NHL, was it the Blues who had the improbable run? That shows you how much I care about the NHL.
Yes.
Outside of maybe the Blues, what in the last 20 years has been a more improbable run than the 04 Pistons in American sports? Because I know there was something in European soccer in the last few years too.
Yes,
the Giants, the 9-7 Giants over the undefeated Patriots, but those 9-7 Giants were not the same Giants in the playoffs.
No, I mean, yeah, they were totally different teams come playoffs. I don't know. Because the Pistons kind of came out of, I don't want to say they came out of nowhere, but it was just like this weird cast of guys who came together
outcasts.
to
they
play.
Were mostly outcasts, and that's why.
Yeah, for sure.
I do think you could do one on the Kobe Shaq Lakers, or just Kobe in general. I think we're probably eventually going to get a long form Kobe.
Oh, for sure.
I don't know if I had a whole lot else down. Nothing on the Lions stood out to me, which is bad because the your Millen one was so great. Oh, I did want to note this. I think it would be hard to do a LeBron because you had your Jordan one. You're going to get your Kobe one. You probably will get your LeBron one. But because of all the moves, like it's such a different career path. And this, I don't knock him for that. I did when I was younger. I don't really care anymore. But I think it'd be hard to have the same feel of the Jordan doc because it's just like the dude jumps ship every few years.
What I realized from this basketball documentary about Michael Jordan, I used to really, really love basketball. Like watching this, I would see guys and I knew them by their names. I would call them out. I knew these teams inside and out. I don't care about basketball the same way. I do not. And you know what? I miss it. And I think a lot of it has to do with how this league is now put together. Having a guy like LeBron James who bounces around from team to team, and then you got guys basically shuffling together to try to create these monster teams. I don't like it. It takes a lot of the fun away for me. There was something about the struggle, right? And I'm going to really date myself, and I'm going to sound like an old man here. And you can go ahead and you can mock me and you can laugh at me about it all. I get it. But there was something about being able to put a core together and then watch this core kind of go through the growing pains to get there one day. And you've seen it with the Pistons.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I get that. I don't blame players for doing what they're doing, but I understand that there's an entertainment value. I think college football is a place where you see it a lot. Not quite the same, but like watching these players come up through your team is there's something special about it.
I just miss it. I miss old basketball, man. I remember
I think the game of basketball, I'll push back on people who think the game of basketball is in a worse place. I think the game of basketball is far more fun to watch now than it was in the 2000s.
It's much more athletic.
And people like say bad defense. I would tell you that the offense has opened up because players can shoot from anywhere on the court. It's not that players don't know how to play defense. It's that players are being asked to guard way more of the court. I actually think I think you really see it when you watch in person. Like there are some things you see better when you watch a game. I think when you go to a basketball game, the speed with which rotations happen in the NBA is insane. It's like guys generally aren't just like man up straight on their man, like ISO ball all game long. Like dudes are like rotating like crazy to help. And I think it's fun to watch. And teams like the Warriors, the reason that they had so much success is everyone could shoot. So the help, if you helped, eventually you're going to get the open guy, but also the way they moved the ball to take advantage of teams who were helping. Like I actually think the sport of basketball and the way it's played right now is more fun than it was in the mid 2000s or, I didn't watch before that. But defense was actually better in the mid 2000s than the 90s. You can disagree if you'd like, but point totals would tell you that that's the case. I think the game is better, but I understand your disappointment with everybody moving around.
Yeah, I think it's a more entertaining game. I don't know, man. For some reason, you know how has there ever been a sport that you absolutely loved and you just kind of fell out of love with it? Is like, did you, as a kid growing up, did you love baseball?
No, I think the closest thing would be hockey. Hockey was the first sport that I loved. But okay. I never loved hockey the way that I love basketball and football. But it was the first sport that I loved, and you hear how much I make fun of it now.
Yeah, you mock it religiously. Basketball for me, though, it legitimately for me it went hockey, basketball, and then football when I was a kid, and those have now shifted around a lot. It just sucks because I remember being a kid sitting in my kitchen with a telephone that was attached to a wall because I'm like 100.
Oh, I had those too.
And I had a TV that was a small colored TV. It was like 10 inches. It was a 10-inch TV. It's our kitchen TV. And I would watch the Detroit Pistons play on UPN 50, and I would sit on the phone and I would talk to my best friend because we would watch the basketball games together over the telephone. It was crazy. I remember watching Grant Hill and Joe Dumars, and I remember seeing Isaiah Thomas go down and then never come back.
I remember being in an AIM chat group for chat room or whatever for a Pistons draft. I don't remember what year it was off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure Eric Gordon was in that draft because I know I wanted the Pistons to take him. Now I'm really curious, who did the Pistons get that year? I was never on the phone with people during games, but I do remember that very vividly, like sitting in my bed on my laptop in an AIM chat room.
I'm going to look up that Eric Gordon draft for you.
2009 NBA draft class. We've gotten so off topic here, Stoz. I don't know. I think
that's what happens.
I think
it's like the old.
I was literally going to say. I think since I moved to Houston and we started doing this over Skype, I think I've done a better job keeping you on track. But that just did not happen here today.
I think I'm more conscious now because of everything that we've got going on. I don't want to lose the recording.
The Pistons picked 29 in this draft and took DJ White. Yeah, Eric Gordon went 7. He wasn't going to fall to them, but it was my hope.
No, he definitely was not.
All right, I don't really think I got anything else on this. We somehow got from The Last Dance to your disappreciation
Eric
for
Gordon
basketball and the 2008-2009 NBA draft class. One thing I do want to get to. The time of this is probably going to change in the near future. I don't have a time set yet. I don't know exactly what the game plan is. I would like to continue doing it live. Stoz, I think I speak for both of us saying that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's been a good time doing it live, but the timing will likely change. I also don't know what's going to happen next week. I very well may be driving home during this next week. So the live podcast is going to continue. We love your participation if you're there. If not, on the podcast after the fact, at Brendan Riley _ at Adam R. Stoz on anything we said today. And I guess keep an eye out for a possible